Here we are for the very first episode of our podcast.
90s Classics.
90s Classics, all right, we're the working title for the moment. I'm Tim.
I'm Andrew.
And our first movie is going to be The Rock, directed by Michael Bay, starring Nicolas Cage, Sean Connery, Ed Harris, Michael Bain. Michael Bain, who I met only a few months ago at Supernova, so we're now best friends. We chose this movie as our starting point, largely because it actually had a fairly significant role in our movie going and, for that matter, our friendship. Andrew, there was many beers involved. My memory of this is awfully sketchy. I believe yours is fractionally better, so why don't you tell the story?
Right. My parents' house, they were away, lots of mates over. Point in the evening where you're getting together and just sort of chatting and just talking shit with people. At this point in time, I think it was the same for you. My friends were too cool for watching movies like The Rock at this point in time, and I was struggling for people to see them with.
I was getting disturbed. There's a lot of people going to the Lumiere back in those days and watching an art house movie. And guys, anyone for the new action movie? No, okay.
And we had both seen it, but not together. And at this point in time, I mean, we were decent mates because you were over at my house, but not really. Didn't hang out one to one, as I recall.
Group. Yeah, in the same group, got on perfectly well, but it never clicked, I guess, on anything in particular.
And on some really old brown daggy leather couches upstairs, realised that we'd both seen The Rock, realised we loved it, banged on about it excitedly for ages, and then realised that we had generally similar taste in movies. I'd worked in a video store and you were instantly jealous because that was your life's ambition at that point in time. And went forth from there and started watching a heap of movies together. Most interesting about this is how much the movie stands up to not being 18 anymore.
I mean, look, I remember thinking it was really, really good at the time. And I remember the particular scene, the big Michael Bain, Ed Harris standoff was exceptional. Other than that, I don't have a great amount of memory about it. It's not one of those movies I've gone back and rewatched. You never hear it mentioned in anyone's top 10 or even top 50 movies of all time or anything like that. So look, I suspect it was good. I suspect it probably wasn't great. But I am really intrigued to watch it because I certainly loved it at the time.
It was very, very military, and I had maybe a 5-year spot in my life where that kind of seemed kind of cool. I probably got over that, but at that point in time, dudes waving guns around to save the world was a bit happening. So I remember that. I do think it was very well, unusually strongly acted for an action type movie. Like they recognize the value of getting character actors in, and for whatever reason those people signed on to do the movie, and so the non-shoot 'em up scenes had emotional weight, I think.
Oh, I mean, when you think about the pedigree of those four we just mentioned, I mean, some of the greatest actors of all time in there.
Action movie actors of all time, definitely.
Yeah. But look, I've gone on a massive Nick Cage movie watching spree recently. Bizarrely, I've seen about 6 of his 7 most recent movies, and they go dramatically from just horrendous to really surprisingly good, all 10 out of 10 on the weird factor and 10 out of 10 on the what are you doing in this movie factor. But I've got a big soft spot in my heart for Nick Cage, and I think this was a time when he was just spent a bit of time, I guess, making a bunch of money. He suddenly hit suddenly became an A-lister. The Rock, Con Air, Face Off. Sean Connery, I guess, was coming off almost creating a new generation of fans with Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Because as you were, obviously, I was way too young to have watched him in James Bond. I didn't know anything about him until Last Crusade, and so all of a sudden I was like, hey, this guy's amazing. Have you guys seen this Sean Connery bloke? And then he comes up in The Rock. Wow, I told you guys, he's really good. Ed Harris and Michael Bain, both from The Abyss, one of my favourite movies, I'm pretty sure, at the time, as well. And I was a huge fan of it when it came out in, I want to say, 87. I was massively obsessed with The Abyss, and so to have them both in the same movie again and both being awesome that was a big treat at the time.
I remember being a bit fascinated by Alcatraz. I didn't know a bunch about it, but it's a cool concept, an offshore prison, and I used to like kind of escape movies and escape books and stuff when I was younger.
Yep.
And I think they they used the setting a bit. There's a couple of cool kind of escapey kind of elements. So quite looking forward to that.
They filmed in Alcatraz, didn't they?
I would be surprised if they didn't.
Yeah, I would have thought so.
I also remember that Nick Cave's character was biochemist, and 1996 is the first year of university where I was studying science, and I had some thoughts that I wanted to be a biochemist at that point in time. And in fact, I enrolled in biochemistry in second year in 97. That was before I needed a conditional pass to get out of first year chemistry and realised I was appalling at organic chemistry, so pulled out completely. But at the time, being a bit of a nerd, that was a master stroke of bringing in like nerd fanboys by casting like a geeky scientist who saved the day. So a bit of clever casting from the Michael Bay.
I mean, my mum is actually a biochemist. So I can fully imagine her participating in the events of the rock. Absolutely no problem at all.
Ask you, Tim, do you think you will enjoy it this time around?
I think I'll definitely enjoy it. I think it will be objectively good, but I will not quite know what all the fuss was about at the time. I suspect it won't live up to how significant a movie it's ended up being in my life. But I think it'll be pretty. I mean, there's a reason why it was successful. There's a reason why Michael Bay got given the money to go on and make a whole bunch of bigger budget, much worse movies after that. So I think it'll be really good, but that's about it, I think. How about you?
I think I concur. I suspect that the classic scenes will still be classic because I think, for all his many faults, Michael Bay knew how to film a good action scene or a good emotionally charged scene. Strong character actors, as I mentioned. I suspect the very pro-military boys' own, absolutely absent female characters will bother me more this time than it did 25 years ago.
Yeah, we were going back looking at IMDb before this, and there was not a lot of female actors in there. I think strangely Claire Forlani in there. Apparently, I have no memory whatsoever of what her role was, so I'll be interested to see what that was all about.
In fact, she is going to be Sean Connery's daughter. There's a scene at the beginning where he wants to escape. That's his motivation for it all comes back to me. Right. That's his motivation for for doing the job is to see his daughter.
Okay.
It comes back to me. But we would not have had any idea who she was then because that would have been pre-Meet Joe Black, I think.
Yes, that's right. I certainly have no memory of her at the time.
I'm also quite enthused about a scene that's near the end of the movie with Ed Harris, David Morse, and one other character, which is another face-off scene. Which I think not face off in the later bastardization of the word.
Taking someone's face off and put it on someone else. No, not in that sense.
Not like that. So I expect that to be really good. Yes, I'm totally pumped to see it.
Yeah. I'm super pumped to rewatch it. Yeah. All right. Well, on that note, let's press pause, go away and watch it, and we'll come back and report on our findings. And we're back. So we've gone away and we've both watched The Rock, and we're here to now report back on what our findings were. Maybe Andrew, do you want to start us off with, I guess, your general impressions?
Generally, I was pleased to still enjoy it. I was a little had some trepidation, but settled in and took me on a small journey back to being 18 again, or whatever the age was, and with a few flaws. Generally, thought it was it was a cool movie.
Yeah, broadly speaking, I agreed. It was actually it was actually somewhat better quality than I remembered. Some things I liked now that I didn't so much like then, and vice versa. Some of the scenes that I remembered being absolutely awesome were just okay. But on the other hand, what I was really impressed by was just, it was actually a really smart, clever action movie in a way that is oddly rare, I find. I was impressed by the time and effort they gave to the, I guess, in quotes, baddie, the Ed Harris character, who was just exceptional, just so good for what was really, on the face of it, a dumb American Hollywood movie. Just this really well-crafted, well-acted character who, frankly, I think raised it to a level that it didn't necessarily deserve to be. Yeah, your thoughts?
I would completely agree with that. That was one of the notes that I took. Ed Harris, superb.
Yep.
I actually think possibly the acting was the crucial thing in there. The character, if you dug too far below the surface, some of the dialogue was a bit cheesy.
Yep.
But he carried it off with such aplomb, if that is the correct word, that absolutely rated it. And I would say generally the three leads all elevated the material. Like, Nick Cage is a hit or miss dude. Sean Connery plays the same character every single time for the last 30 years of his life. But they did what they're good at within their limitations. Whereas I thought Ed Harris has huge range and is a genius. And he was a genius at a character different than a character I've seen before.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. It sort of reminded me, and look, these two movies are not comparable in quality, but it did remind me of why Die Hard is so awesome. Real focus on the baddie and on having a complex, interesting baddie, and also just generally being intelligent in the way that everything panned out. I mean, I'm sure on closer inspection it would all fall to pieces, but I've got to say I spent most of my time watching it. I didn't have too many of those moments where you think, what a ridiculous thing to do, or why don't they just do X instead of Y? I'm sure there's all sorts of things out there that they could have done better or differently, but none of them really leapt out to me, and I thought it was all approached in a quite intelligent way. All the background stuff was not, all the, I guess the political stuff going on in the background was all suitably nuanced and suitably intelligent. They weren't just being cowboys. They weren't all just being baddies in the way that these government people are often portrayed. They're often, you've got the War Office just wanting to napalm everything at the drop of a hat. They actually looked at it, they approached it intelligently, and actually spent a bit of time doing that, which was, I didn't remember it being that way, and it was actually really quite impressive, I thought. Yeah, no,
I would concur with that. Like, it's and especially considering, like, its meal ticket was its military sort of focus, like emotive music, boys' own hero stuff, like. But it managed to do that in the way that perhaps Michael Bay's Pearl Harbor spectacularly failed to do that.
Yep.
Where it couldn't, it couldn't provide a nuanced view of a problem.
Yes.
Maybe because this was internal terrorism, so it had to be a nuanced view, and that's what made it interesting. General Hummel was a nuanced character because he was a good guy doing something really bad.
Yes.
Could have easily been bad, and many other movies like this don't pull it off. Many other Michael Bay movies have not pulled it off, but it did, just about most of the time.
I think that the line that really stuck in my mind that I think didn't make any impression on me at all as a young person, but I guess now maybe, I don't know, more concerned with the ethics and all of everything, was, because I have to say I couldn't remember what happened, whether Ed Harris ended up turning bad or how he actually, what exactly happened there. And the great line right at the end when he eventually just puts his foot down and says, no, we're pulling out. And the line, something about, look, this was about a show of force. We bluffed. They called it. It's over. I just thought that was really intelligent. Just really, really summed up what was going on, and I guess summed up the character and the subtleties of the character, and then the difficult situation he found himself in when clearly the rest of his team didn't agree with him on that. And in that respect also, as a movie, it was really good because you have the intelligent character, the intelligent baddie character, but then you also have the sort of the fundamental baddies who can be there for the end, the other guys who don't want to do it, who want to kill all the innocent people. And so you can have the satisfaction of just some baddies being killed at the end without having to, softened the fact that the Ed Harris character was actually really nuanced and intelligent.
And I also think that like they saved themselves by that ending, because one of the bits I struggled with a little bit was the number of times the Pentagon or whoever the government body were talked about how, General Hummel was a man of honor. After the fact, they'd already known he'd undertaken theft, kidnapping, and, a hostage situation. You are no longer a man of honor at that point in time.
Yeah.
However, like, obviously there was honor deep within him. If when pushed to the absolute nth point, the fundamental decency remained.
Yep, absolutely. Look, I thought there were some negatives that I'll bring up. I'll be interested to hear if you had any others. I mean, the one which is pretty obvious is just the fact there are basically no meaningful female characters in the entire movie. And look, I think you can easily justify the group of baddies being all male, because they were a group of army guys. Probably unrealistic to have a group of army guys in that era, because I think they were from Vietnam. I think they'd served together. So fair enough there. But I think that the part that can't really be explained is why there wasn't a single female in any of the political backside of it anyway. None of the scientists were female, none of the politicians were female. I think literally the only two female characters were Claire Forlani as Sean Connery's daughter, who was in it for a full 3 minutes.
Yep.
And then Nicolas Cage's girlfriend, whose sole job in the movie was basically screaming and crying, as far as I can tell.
Yes, you really can't put it any other way. Bechdel test failed
horribly.
Absolutely substantially. And just the poorer for it. I was braced for that. I remembered that there was very few, but you're right. There wasn't even, the butlers were male. The front desk staff was male. It was just ridiculous. People who answered the phone were male.
Yep.
Like, two genders do exist, Michael Bay. But anyway, yes, that was as expected, but as delivered.
My other one is possibly more controversial. I'm not sure, especially based on what you've said already. I thought Nicolas Cage, and back then he wasn't known for just playing Nicolas Cage all the time, from my memory. I think now it's become a bit of a joke that he plays Nicolas Cage. He's always loud and shouty and over the top. And I found he was just on the verge of ruining the movie. I didn't quite get... his character on paper was supposed to be this sort of nerdy chemical engineer type guy. And yet he sort of played him as a really angry, shouty, smart-talking guy who just happened to have this, the hottest girlfriend that any chemical engineer has ever had. And in fact, I think they even made a joke that she was, in fact, the prom queen from his local town. And I was just going, geez, I'm not quite sure I like this character. I think it was his attempt to become A-list leading man action, which he sort of did successfully, but it didn't quite fit for me. It just made it. I still liked him. I was still gunning for him, but geez, he was on the verge of just going, I'm not sure this is the right guy for this role.
Interesting. Like, I hadn't thought of it like that. He definitely, was doing the Nick Cage thing. I thought that he provided a bit of necessary comic touch, and enough of his gags worked.
Yeah,
like the one about getting Sean Connery a coffee, and he says, "Would you like a coffee?" And he goes, "No, thanks." He goes, "No, I meant for me." I thought it was genius.
Yeah, good.
And the leaving his gun in the sock drawer.
Yeah,
I thought there was enough brevity moments that he worked, but it took me a little while to get into it. The character really stretched the credibility. I had less of a hard time with Sean Connery being a secret agent at 65 and able to mix it with Navy SEALs, which is a little bit of a stretch.
Luckily, despite hasn't lost any of his skills over
30
years.
Of jail,
yep.
But,
still, good on him. Yeah, they trained hard just in case of this exact scenario coming up.
But Nicolas Cage being both a biochemist and also a bomb disposal dude.
Yeah.
Is that dual training that you get in the military? I struggled a little bit with his breadth of character between being completely useless to incredibly competent.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that was a bit of a stretch.
Yeah. Sean Connery, on the other hand, I have to say, I couldn't actually remember what his character was. I'd completely forgotten about the whole thing about how he'd been in jail and he was this big tough guy. And, I mean, as you said, playing Sean Connery, but just such a charming guy, so successfully, particularly given that he was a oldish guy, I don't know, 60-odd at the time, I think was very successful in depicting someone who could, as you say, take on a team of Navy SEALs. He was physically imposing, he was charming, he was funny. I thought all that worked quite well in it. And he was gruff enough to be believable, gruff and angry enough to be believable, but then also I believed it when he turned around at the end and helped. So no, I thought Sean Connery was great.
Yeah. I thought that the scene, in terms of scenes that I loved, the first scene where we meet Sean Connery, the first shot of his face,
yes,
where he's fully like overgrown and it's really, really dark.
Yep.
I was like, oh, Michael Bay, you are capable of like a money shot that is not something blowing up when you take the time to do it.
Yeah, or a close up of a woman's breast.
Yeah, indeed. So that was I really liked that scene. A couple of less good ones. The face melting was utterly ridiculous. The dude at the beginning when they kidnap when they take the bombs, and he gets locked inside the room and his face melts in 10 seconds. I have not Googled what was it called, whatever the nasty chemical was.
Yep.
I am pretty sure that doesn't happen that quickly.
It's probably right.
Corrected by all the million listeners.
Yep.
What else did we have? The Ed Harris walking in and going, "I'll take 16," in this meticulously planned plot that he just made a spontaneous decision then that they would take 16.
Yep.
I thought that was quite funny. And so there was a few. Another interesting thing I thought was maybe this is getting on to how it's aged and how it hasn't aged, but an interesting blend of things which were quite new and fresh. Like maybe the sort of military stuff still felt fairly new and fresh to me.
Yep.
Whereas like as soon as anyone picked up a phone, it was like, oh my God, I'm looking at a movie. Is this only 30 years ago?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, okay, let's move on to, unless did you have any other negatives you wanted to raise?
What else did I have? I thought that there was a little bit of the black dudes were violent and evil. Mm-hmm. So there was the two, there was the evil captain who was one of the two evil dudes, like the second last guy.
Who was all in for the money at the end.
Yeah, that was the money guy. Mm-hmm. And then there was the "I have a mind to gut you, boy" guy. They were like it was a bit of a throwback to like Predator, with a black dude just wants to take him on with a knife.
Yeah.
It's all about the violence. Well, that was a touch unfortunate. Comic genius Ed Harris does absolutely nothing with his hands the entire movie. Like he's the pure manager captain just giving instructions, never runs anywhere, and then personally reroutes the bomb with some sort of complicated programming.
Yep, genius.
I thought that was genius.
Hacked into the mainframe, no doubt.
And I would like to know atropine versus a neurotoxin. How does that work scientifically? Yeah. I as something of a scientist myself long ago, I feel that needs to be investigated. It's a great movie crutch.
Yep.
It was very good cinema, but whether it's got any basis in fact at all, I'm not sure.
Yep.
That's probably the ones that come to mind.
Yep. No, and look, I think we've already touched on a lot of the features, but how has it aged? So what year was it again? 96?
Oh, geez, I think it was 95. I think we decided.
Look, as with I guess all the movies where we're going to be reviewing, they were primarily this was before CGI for the most part, or probably entirely, and so as a result, I think the action looked really good. I mean, my view is that action tended to get worse after CGI came in, and so the fact that it was all practical effects I thought were really good, and so with that respect I thought it aged really well in terms of the action and the look. There was nothing where I sort of laughed or rolled my eyes at the special effects. I thought they were all pretty good, and look, I think we've already dealt with the social issues that probably would be significantly different if the movie was made today, but with other than that, I thought it was if that same movie had come out again with some minor amendments to deal with those issues, I don't think it would be completely out of place.
I'd agree with that. It didn't feel its age at all. In fact, the most dominant thing for me, Tim would know that my television at home is from the Dark Ages, and the television that I watch this on is new and fancy and quite different technology. And it was almost the effect of the new television on the old movie. But I actually think it stood up very, very well in that situation.
Yep.
So by and large, I think it aged really well.
Yeah.
All right. And I think that's, again, because it's so performance driven.
Yes.
And that stuff doesn't age. I do have a couple of genius moments. I still thought that the shower scene with Michael Bain, still genius.
Yeah, agreed. I thought it was great. It was still one of the highlights of the movies. I'd somehow put it up on the pedestal to the point where I thought it was the best scene that had ever been put on film in the history of cinema. It wasn't quite like that, but I thought it was, I still thought it was really, really good. Michael
Bain could, play a sock or alternatively act in Meteor, and I would still think that he was an absolute genius.
Absolute hero.
I'm not a fair judge there. And the other one that I was better than I remembered was maybe I'd forgotten that I liked it as much. I'd remembered the shower scene, but the green smoke scene at the end, basically the getting off the green smoke, like lying backwards, Willem Dafoe in Platoon style. I'd forgotten about that, and I went, oh, that's genius.
Yeah, and in fact, one moment that I remember from seeing it in a packed cinema was the part at the very, very, very end when they go in with the napalm and then they say, stop, stop. And that guy he gets the order to say stop, but his finger was already going, and he presses it. And I even love the fact that he goes, oh God, I've pressed it, or something like that. And I remember the entire cinema gasped at that moment. It was a really, really impressive moment where the whole cinema was like, oh my God. And even though that scene, when watching just myself sitting on my couch at home, didn't quite have that same feeling to it, I thought that was also a great moment. And just the horror it was a completely faceless character. I don't think we even saw him. Just the horror in his voice as he realizes that he's pressed it, I thought was really, really good.
And I got one last one, and this is one that I definitely wouldn't have picked up on 20 years ago. The final Ed Harris scene, where he's just realizing, you sort of mentioned it before, he's just realizing that he's losing control of his men. Like two things. The concept before of everything being built on military discipline, and that being such a big thing, but military discipline goes when you start acting outside the law.
Yep.
And I'd never thought about that the first time, but that was actually a really significant feature of the movie this time.
Yep.
And secondly, specifically Ed Harris's voice quavering right at the end, just before he basically gets shot. I just thought that was a moment of whether he produced that or they practiced it on many takes or something or other, but I've only ever been able to produce that involuntarily, and you hate yourself for it when you're public speaking and you suddenly sound really shaky. But if you can produce that as an actor, that was awesome.
Oh, no, completely agree. And in fact, especially given what Michael Bay went on to do, I have to assume that all of the genius came from Ed Harris himself. And I also remember just one moment where I think his sort of closest second in command pointed the gun, and just the little eye darting from Ed Harris over there and back to the rest of his group, just subtle but brilliant. And similarly, that great line, another great line you reminded me of, we're soldiers, damn it. And the response, we stopped being soldiers as soon as we took the bombs, or whatever it was, and now we're mercenaries and mercenaries get paid. Great line.
I'll just add as well, the ways it's aged, they were doing it for $1 million each.
Yeah.
Absolutely love that. Almost Austin Powers-esque.
Yep.
In terms of, that is 100 times out of shape now.
Yep. Anyway. Brilliant. Well, I think we've got to the end of our review of The Rock. So the question is, what is our next movie that we're going to watch? Over to you, Andrew.
Ta-da. Okay, our next movie is going to be 1997's Mimic.
Oh, great choice.
So, a little bit of background on Mimic, and then I'll ask you about what your memories are. 1997 is Mimic came out. I watched it at the cinema with you.
Yep.
In fact, it was part of our one, and to my knowledge, only double feature. The one crime we have both committed in our very square lives, where we paid for one movie ticket and we walked into a second movie.
Did we really?
I swear that was Mimic.
My God.
Yes, I'm almost certain that is true.
Do you remember what the second movie was?
No. I think Mimic was the second. I can't remember what the first. Though doubtless we'll cover it in this podcast series because it'll be from the same era. So, Mira Sorvino, who was totally like top of her game at the time, she'd won an Oscar for Mighty Aphrodite.
Yep.
And kind of, not exactly disappeared, but, career went downhill at that point in time.
How better to follow it up with a giant insect movie? I can't even remember what the monsters were.
Well, exactly. Yeah. And Guillermo del Toro is the director, which I had forgotten.
Right.
This is his first big Hollywood movie. Pre-Blade 2 and the Hellboy movies, and prior to Pan's Labyrinth and obviously The Shape of Water.
Yep.
Yes. So thoughts on reviewing Mimic?
Oh, absolutely pumped. I remember the movie. I remember Mira Sorvino being in it. I remember that it is genius because a kid gets killed in the opening few scenes. I remember, which is really shocking. I mean, even probably today, but I remember back. It was almost a bit of a cliche that the cute kid and the puppy could never get killed. At least, unless my memory is defeating me, I'm pretty sure they have a kid who appears for. It looks absolutely clear like he's going to somehow escape and he gets brutally killed by this creature. Just because I remember it sticking in my mind going, whoa, we're in for something exciting here. I have no memory whatsoever after that. I remember it being pretty good. I'm not sure that I've rewatched it many times, and I remember it being, maybe giant insects, but that's about the best I can come up with.
I had to read the IMDb page to get a vague memory of what it is about. Yes, it is broadly giant insects which mimic humans.
Oh.
And I didn't remember that at all. Funnily enough, I remembered that you and I both really liked it, but your dad hated it.
What?
Which is an obscure memory, but because your dad, I don't think, watches the same movies as you do.
What on earth would my dad have been doing watching Mimic?
There you go.
Well, I'm going to have to check this with him.
So, and I remember thinking it was really good and a cut above that sort of movie.
Yep.
And the fact that Guillermo del Toro directed it would be supportive of that. Indeed. Because he's a quality director. Yep. But IMDb has not been kind, like 6.0. And so, I am ready for all ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Also, significant clashes between Guillermo del Toro and the Weinsteins about like creative control. And so GDT actually disowned the movie for many, many years. And he almost got fired off set. But Mira Sorvino campaigned for him to stay, and at the time she had huge pull because she just won an Oscar.
Yep.
And she was dating Quentin Tarantino at the time, and Quentin Tarantino 1997 was the world's biggest cinema person. So totally interesting backstory. So interestingly, GDT made a director's cut in 2011.
Oh, goodness.
That he said he's happy with. He's not, he wants people to watch it because if they don't like it, at least he's to blame and not mixed. So I think we have a decision to make whether we watch the original or whether we watch the director's cut.
That's a very good question. I feel it would be more true to the podcast to watch the original.
Yeah.
I'd then be interested, depending on how it turns out to be, might be interested in then watching the director's cut.
I reckon that's the way to go. We'll see if we still like it.
Indeed.
Anyway.
Very good choice. I'm excited.
Pumped.
Yep.
Bring it on.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, everyone, and until next time.